Okay, last week I got a couple of complaints from new or newish people who stumbled across the channel that the thanks I did at the beginning, where I was thanking everybody who used the super thanks button, that it was too long and it got too annoying. So, JJ's channel, James, Nancy, thanks. Moving on.
Maximalist Minibus with Mary and Captain and you. Get on the bus!
If you came to check out what's going on at the farm location I landed at on the last video, I'll tell you more about that in the next video. But right now, we're going to take a little detour into one of the most frequently asked questions that I get on YouTube, on Instagram, on Facebook, or in person. Really anywhere I go in the virtual or physical world, people ask me, how's the gas mileage on that thing? First of all, it's not gas mileage because this is a diesel bus, okay? And I'm not just saying that to be a wise ass. I know that people use gas to mean fuel in general, but I've had my diesel tanks filled with gasoline. A Ford dealer did it and then denied that they did it and then finally admitted that they did it. But diesel vehicles don't like gas, so I'm kind of a stickler at this point for calling diesel diesel and gas gas. Anyway, the question that people are trying to ask is, how's your fuel economy? People assume that because Max is 30 years old, but 30 is 120 in car years. Because he's so old and because he's boxy and big, they assume that Max gets like 5 miles a gallon. And this is all becoming super important because fuel prices, as I'm sure you know, are crazy high right now. Max's actual number, so many things affect it, but the range is generally 10 to 13 miles per gallon of diesel. I don't know, I think that's pretty good. Maybe it's not great for a vehicle, but it's definitely on the high end, I think, for a house. The factors that affect it, which also will affect you, fall into 3 categories. Things that are not in your control, things that you have control of in a limited way, and things that are totally within your control on you. These categories overlap, and I can't really break it down super neatly, and it's not as straightforward when you're driving a house as it is when you're driving a car. The first way you can control this is by choosing the right vehicle in the first place. And of course, in this case, size matters because the bigger the vehicle, the more fuel it's going to use. It's not going to be as simple as looking it up on a table the way it would be with a car, because builds can vary. They can be very, very different, even factory builds, but there are things you can check. What vehicle is best suited for the type of driving you see yourself doing? You'll find a lot of info on Facebook groups or forums about which engines are most comfortable at which speeds. Some buses have a thing called a governor that prevents them from speeding, so you want to check if the bus you're considering has one and whether or not it can be disabled. Or maybe you don't want, maybe you want to keep it so you can stick to 55. I don't know. All the research I've ever seen indicates that 55 to 65 is pretty much the best rate of travel for general economy. Max wants to go 75 most of the time though, and here's where the stuff you can control comes in. I try to stick to 65, but if I'm daydreaming or caught up in the podcast I'm listening to, Max reverts to his preferred speed, which, like I said, is about 75. And a lot of times the speed limit is even higher than that. In some parts of the U.S., the speed limit is 80, and I'm not just talking on the highways. Sometimes it's 80 on the side roads, too. It's hard not to get caught up in that flow, because nobody wants to be that snail crawling down the highway. We tend to want to keep up. And, if the speed limit is 65, that means the traffic around you is probably going about 75, because that's how we roll as Americans. I'm not immune to that peer pressure. How you drive, your driving habits, things like how, are you somebody that uses the brakes a lot? That affects it too, because my experience has been that maintaining a consistent speed is even more important than what the speed is. Like a lot of things in life, consistency counts. So if you're varying your speed, if you're going from fast to stopped frequently, it's going to reduce your efficiency. Brakes interrupt that consistency. And on some roads, especially ones with a grade, up and down hills, my speed varies a lot because I'm doing the speed limit or that slightly over number. And then a big uphill comes, which is putting a lot more strain on my 30-year-old vehicle. So I have to slow down. And that brings me to another related thing, terrain. I would put terrain in the category of things you can't control because you have to go where you have to go. Sure, you could take a different route, but life would be pretty boring if I mapped out routes to everything based on how smooth the pavement is. You can try it, I guess. Good luck with that. Anyway, that's where I'm putting it. One of the most significant factors in fuel economy is, not surprisingly, tires. I'm going to make a whole other video on the tire subject because it's so overlooked and it's made a huge difference for me. There are several things about your tires that affect performance, one of them being inflation. Buses and RVs, a lot of times they have kind of weird inflation requirements. It's not a given that all your tires are supposed to be inflated to the same pressure. And you can't really go by what it says on the tire either. You have to check the inside of the door where your GVW are and your VIN number are. And there should be some inflation info there. Mine, for example, are supposed to be inflated to 80 in the rear and 51 in the front. And that's weird, right? But anything different affects both my fuel economy and the overall performance of the bus. Tires that are worn out or that don't have a strong enough sidewall for the vehicle can cause problems too with efficiency. But all-terrain tires are generally an economy killer because they have more resistance. They're designed to have more resistance. You have to weigh these things out. Do you need rugged tires that can pull you out of mud and run on crappy washboard gravel roads? If so, you're going to reduce your highway economy by like 3%, which it doesn't sound like a lot, but with these prices, it makes a difference if you're traveling long distance. Another uncontrollable factor, and this is a huge one for me, is wind. Max is tall and skinny, and that makes the bus especially susceptible to wind. And I've had people say, well, that doesn't make sense because trucks are much taller than Max and they don't get blown the way that you do. But trucks have 18 wheels. Max isn't even a dually. So you have this tall vehicle with a narrow wheelbase and only 4 wheels. If you look at most short buses, they're almost all dualies, which means there's a total of 6 wheels, 2 in the front and 4 in the back. A singly, I don't actually know if that's a word, but now it's a word, that is not going to be as stable in the wind. Now, there are a few other advantages to not being a dually, like turn radius, but in windy highway driving, a singly is going to take the hit a lot worse and is generally going to be fighting the wind, unless it's a straight-on tailwind. But that really never happens. When the bus is fighting just to stay on the road, it's going to use more fuel. Axle alignment. Axle alignment is super important. A slight misalignment can cause a lot of drag. And drag, of course, it's going to be a drag. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Another thing that creates drag is open windows. Generally, I drive with the windows closed if I can. I can't always, though, because I don't have air conditioning. But that's another factor. If you keep your AC cranked up on high, that brings your economy down too. So again, priorities. Here's one that's totally on you, and that is good maintenance habits. There are a lot of variables within this category. Just keeping your vehicle healthy as possible is going to help you maximize your fuel use. So, to sum up, things like wind, terrain, stop and go traffic, they're going to be outside your control for the most part. Choosing a vehicle, that is within your control to a large extent, but there are no perfect vehicles out there. So it's largely a question of weighing priorities. Your build falls into that basket too. A big way that you can help your vehicle is just by paying attention to your driving habits. That's one of the things we said is on you. How you brake, how fast you go, keeping that consistency. But the most important thing you can do to get the most out of your fuel is to maintain your vehicle. That'll keep you safer too, so yeah, why not do that? If I left anything out or got anything wrong, just tell me about it in the comments, because I'm sure you will. And come back on Sunday to see what's next at the farm. If you didn't see the first video from the farm, here it is.